Question: how many times can fallen beings reincarnate? You mentioned on the website that some rock stars, criminals, and maybe war criminals like Putin are fallen beings. Have they always been fallen beings? Or did they, because of free will or bad actions, fall? One day they will die on the physical plane. Can they come back and fall again? Or is there a chance for some of them to become good again? Okay, so what you need to do if you're interested in this topic is watch my video on how the world was created. Because I talk about there in detail about the fall. So there's a couple of things in this question that shows that the person hasn't really watched this. Because have they always been fallen beings? No, they were created like all beings are, having some connection to the higher selves. And then, as I explained, they came to a point where they chose to reject growth, and they fell. And they fell into the next sphere that was created after their sphere ascended, but they also fell into a lower state of consciousness. And, once you have fallen into that state of consciousness, you can overcome it, but you have to be willing to admit that you made the decision to go into the fallen consciousness. So you have to turn around and start walking a spiritual path. If you don't do that, you will be in the fallen consciousness indefinitely. And that means that you can take embodiment on a planet like Earth and live for 70, 80 years. You die, you're still in the fallen consciousness. You can come back into embodiment, but you're still in the fallen consciousness. So it's not like this is just something that happens in one lifetime and then it's wiped out when the body dies. Your soul is in that. Your follower bodies, they are, or identity, mental and emotional bodies, they are in that fallen consciousness. And as the question is there a chance for them to become good again? Absolutely. But it requires them to make the choice to abandon the fallen consciousness. Now the question is, and the reason why I'm commenting on this is, how many times can a fallen being reincarnate? And that's a very interesting question, but it doesn't have a fixed answer. Because it depends on a lot of conditions. I have actually talked about it in another answer where I talk about the second death. And you might want to look at that answer also if you're interested in the topic. But basically the idea is, your I Am Presence, your higher self, sends the conscious you an extension of itself into embodiment in an unascended sphere. And the purpose is the growth of the I Am Presence. But the conscious you has free will, and it can refuse to grow. And it can then fall into the fallen consciousness. And it can keep doing this not only over many lifetimes, but even over several of these spheres. And we are talking an extremely long time span as we measure time on Earth. I don't even know how long a sphere lasts because it's different from different spheres. And it's almost meaningless to talk about because it's such a long time span that it's just a meaningless number. But so the question is, when will the I Am Presence of a fallen being, a fallen conscious you, decide that it's had enough of having a part of itself in that lower state of consciousness? Then the other consideration is, when will the conscious you of the fallen being decide that it's had enough of experiencing the fallen consciousness and decide to turn around? And then there is the fact that on a planet like Earth, as I've explained also in the video about how the world was created and some of the other videos in that playlist, how the world works, there was a point where the Ascended Masters who oversaw Earth could see that it was in a self-destructive spiral. And as an attempt to pull the Earth out of this, they allowed fallen beings to incarnate here. That means that the fallen beings are a kind of substitute teacher. In other words, the inhabitants of Earth could not listen to the real teachers, the Ascended Masters. They were in the school of hard knocks. And so the fallen beings became substitute teachers because the fallen beings are willing to outplay extreme selfishness so that the people on Earth can see, do they want to follow these fallen leaders into disaster after disaster after disaster, or do they want to reach for a higher kind of leader, the Ascended Masters? And so it's really a matter of, on a planet like Earth, how many times can a fallen being reincarnate? Are the inhabitants of the Earth learning the lesson they need to learn from that fallen being? Have they followed a fallen being over several lifetimes and now they're beginning to wake up and realize we can't do this anymore? Or do they need more time? And so on Earth right now, there's a very, very complex equation. And there's a group of ascended masters who are called the Karmic Board. And they are the ones who are looking. They, of course, have a much higher level of consciousness than you and I have. So they don't need a supercomputer because their minds are, in a way, supercomputers. So they are looking at all of these complex karmic interactions. And they only have one goal, and that is the growth of as many people as possible. So they are looking at, Putin, for example. When have a critical mass of the Russian people learned the lesson they were meant to learn from Putin? When have they decided we've had enough of this? Or other people in other nations, when, on a world scale, when have enough people decided we've had enough of this kind of a self-centered, selfish leader that doesn't care about the suffering he creates for other people, even his own people? And so it's a very, very complex equation. But there can come a point where a fallen being has crossed a certain line, enough people have learned a lesson, and a fallen being is taken out of embodiment, which they can do at any moment. They can just withdraw a certain life force, and the person can't stay in the physical body. But they've also said that sometimes a fallen being can be held alive artificially by the people who haven't learned the lesson. So they have actually said quite some time ago, I think in 2013, that Vladimir Putin had actually gone beyond his natural lifespan, the natural lifespan of his physical body. And he was being kept artificially alive by the Russian people not learning the lesson they were meant to learn. So there can be, considerations like that are difficult for us to grasp because we, of course, look at it from down here, and we may look at a fallen being who's creating immense suffering, and we are saying, why don't the Karmic Board just take him out of embodiment so people aren't suffering? But it's, again, the school of hard knocks, and sometimes the only way people can learn is to see the outplaying of this. Like, couldn't the Karmic Board see in 1939 when Hitler invaded Poland where this was going to end? And couldn't they just have taken Hitler out of embodiment? Yes, but would the German people and other people have learned the lesson they were meant to learn? So, that's where, I remember this, when I was new to the Ascended Master teachings and learned about Karmic Board and fallen beings and this and that, and I just thought with my youthful naivete, well, just wipe out all the fallen beings and we'll have paradise on earth. But I've come to realize that's not the case because people need to learn the lessons. And so I've come to acknowledge a very simple fact that I'm an embodiment. I am looking at the situation from my level of consciousness through whatever filters I have. And I have nowhere near the awareness that the members of the Karmic Board or other Ascended Masters have. So I can't really... I can have an opinion about what's going on Earth, but I can't really have an opinion about what should the Ascended Masters do, because I just don't understand all the considerations that they see. They see so much more than I see. I know this because every time I take a dictation from them, I experience that, their minds are just so much broader than mine. And I sometimes feel like my mind is at the bottom of a little funnel and there's a little hole that the consciousness of the Ascended Master is flowing through, but there's so much more up there. So you just have to say sometimes, well, obviously there's a reason for it, but I'm probably not able to fathom it. And I met many people that this is difficult for because they are still trapped in this linear, analytical outer mind, the conceptual mind. And they think they should be able to understand everything. And if the Ascended Master was just tell us, then they would be able to understand it. And that's a certain spiritual, intellectual pride. I used to have it myself. I used to think that, just tell me and I'll be able to understand it. And now I realized, yeah, there's just some things that, because I'm still in embodiment and I'm looking through my outer mind, there's certain things I just can't fathom that the Ascended Masters see and they grasp. So I've stopped really speculating about it. I just do what I'm here to do. I make the calls to the Ascended Masters and give them the authority to step in. But if they don't step in the way I think they should step in, or at the time I think they should step in, I surrender that. And I still feel it's been valid for me to give the calls because they can certainly do something else with the energy that I'm giving. And so I hope this helps you settle that question a little bit.